Good day, everyone, and welcome back to Fox Ridge Philately. It is Friday, September the 6th, and I'm just here in my office this afternoon, picking away at a few things, and I got thinking more about Iceland and some of the items that I picked up when I was visiting there last spring. As I was flipping through them here a few minutes ago, again just caught my attention. That's what philately does, I find. You go down these rabbit holes all the time, and you could spend a couple of hours just whiling away, checking out some information, see what that's all about when you see a cover or a stamp that makes you ask some questions. And the covers that I have here are, ones I picked up in Iceland, in Reykjavik. And most of them, well, they're all first day issues, first day covers, but most of them are pretty generic, but still really interesting. And I got most of these at a charity shop, so really, really good price. And I was just excited to pick them up and add to my collection. And then there was a couple I picked up at we call them flea market here. I can't remember what they call them in Reykjavik, but same idea. I think it was our second last day there. And it was those ones that really, a couple of them there that made me question something. And I did a bit of Googling and found out the reason why they are what they are. And I'll show you those here shortly. So welcome back to an episode on Iceland. I think I said before, if you ever get a chance to go to Iceland, highly recommend it. It is a spectacular country, wonderful place to visit. It's just otherworldly in many, many ways. And the history of Iceland is fascinating too. Of course, has that strong Norse connection. It is a Scandinavian country. And we think of it being settled by the Norse, which it was, but there's also strong evidence that there were monks that were living there when Scandinavian settlers started to arrive. So we're talking here in the late 700s into the 800s, so that's the 8th and 9th centuries. And then it became settled by the Norse, the Reykjavik area especially, as well as a few other outposts around the island, but clearly Reykjavik became the central area for people to settle. And eventually it became a territory of Norway, which became Norway, Denmark, Sweden, a coalition between what we now know as three separate countries. And then after the Napoleonic War, Norway and Denmark became separate, and it was a Denmark territory, a Danish territory. And since then it has gained its complete independence from Denmark, which took place in the 20th century formally, although there was a strong independence movement in the 19th century, but it formally became a republic in the early to mid 20th century. All right, so just a couple things here quickly. First cover, and I've got these in chronological order. As you can see, it has a cachet here of Reykjavik, although Reykjavik doesn't look like that. That's more of a stylized version. And you see the date of issue down here for 1961, and the stamps up here of the harbor of Reykjavik and the 175. So recognizing in 1961 the 175th anniversary of the formal naming of Reykjavik as a town, as a formal trading post and as a town is what that's referring to. Reykjavik had been settled for hundreds of years before that. The famous Leif Erikson statue you can see in front of the large church in Reykjavik at the top of Rainbow Road. And here is an image of the central building of the university in Reykjavik and a couple of the statesmen that are related to the university too. Excuse me for a moment while I reach around. I really like this one, 1966. It has the Icelandic pony. In Iceland, however, they do not call them ponies, they are horses. So make sure if you're ever in Iceland to refer to them as Icelandic horses or Iceland horses. Very rugged horses, quite ruggedly beautiful, fairly small. They are pony size, but they are also very sure-footed. They're can put up with a lot of the conditions that you'd find climate-wise in Iceland. And we had a chance actually to ride, and that was my partner Suzanne's, one of her requests is she wanted to ride an Icelandic horse. So we did that, we rode it out of the town of Vik and out onto the black sand beach in Vik too, and it was pretty cool. And Icelandic horses, they walk, trot, and canter like other horses do, but they also have a couple of other gaits. One of them is called a tolt. So if you know anything about horses, you know a tolt is quite a different gait than a walk or a trot or a canter. And off the top of my head, I forget the name of the other gait that they do. And Icelanders are very protective of their ponies, horses. So if an Icelandic horse is exported or leaves the island, is not allowed to come back, and they keep they keep their stock very pure, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. This one I like because of the map cachet and Expo 67, which was in Montreal in Canada, and it shows actually how the exploration of the Norsemen went from Iceland to Greenland, down the Labrador coast, and off of the coast of Newfoundland, and eventually a little farther down. Montreal will be off the map, just down here farther again. And it's a map stamp there. And a couple others here. This one, if I can just pull that out for a second. The next page has several others of the same stamps on the first day cover. FDC, don't ask me how to pronounce that. Icelandic language is very unique. It's really not like any language I am familiar with at all. Although in Iceland they all speak English, so speaking Icelandic was not a requirement, thankfully, although we tried to learn a few simple Icelandic words. So same stamps here again. And this is 1970. Give me a second. I can try to pronounce a couple of those words that are represented there on the stamps. The Snæfellsjökull mountain is here on the 1 kroner stamp, and that's pronounced not well at all. The peninsula for the Snæfellsjökull region is just over in here, and Reykjavik would be down in here. And we did our first day out of Reykjavik around this peninsula, and it was spectacular. What else do you say? Our favorite word became wow. Everything in Iceland was a wow. So covers here and just different cachets. Again, these are all ones that I picked up in the charity shop. I think it was the Salvation Army, actually, in Iceland. And a couple other covers. This one reminded me of where we had lunch at, because of the hothouse tomatoes here. There's oh gosh, can't remember the name of it. It was difficult to pronounce anyway. But in the Golden Circle, which you could do as a day trip out of Reykjavik, kind of to the southeast area of from Reykjavik, there is a well-known restaurant and business there with massive greenhouses where they grow all the vegetables, and predominantly it's tomatoes. They're known for the tomatoes, and the restaurant is within the greenhouse itself. And you sit down, have an all-you-can-eat tomato soup and all-you-can-eat bread, and it is delicious. And so this, and excuse me for a moment, and this cover here, I picked up from a lady at the flea market in Reykjavik on her second last day. It's 1973. It is Iceland. You have Icelandic stamps here, but it's President Richard Nixon, which I thought was very odd. And then also Georges Pompidou, who was the president of France at the time, same date. So that would be 1st of June, 1973. And the same stamps are on there, the first day covers. So why are the first day covers of Nixon and Pompidou in Iceland? Well, I had to Google. And what Google told me, and once I went on there and went to a New York Times page, and sorry, I'm just scrolling down through here a little bit so I can get a gander at the New York Times article that popped up, an historical article. So Nixon and Pompidou flew into Reykjavik in end of May 1973 for meetings, so bilateral meetings. Pompidou, it says, refused to go to the U.S. to meet, and it's trade talks, for lack of a better term. And they had 2 days of talks, and they had talks a couple of years, I think it was 1971, a couple of years before that, in the Azores, and they're looking at other mid-Atlantic areas where they could meet for a follow-up. Bermuda was suggested, but there were some concerns around the security in Bermuda, so they chose Iceland. So they met for 2 days in Reykjavik, and therefore you have these cover letters here. Also, at the same time, Iceland was going through a bit of a dispute, fisheries dispute with Great Britain. It talks about that, speaks of that in the New York Times article too, which was really interesting, because Iceland had expanded their territorial fishing rights farther out to sea. I think it's at 50 miles as opposed to a few miles like it was before. And they had an ongoing fishing dispute with Great Britain, and clearly Great Britain was not very impressed with that at all, and there were frigates involved, and there's quite a bit of tension around it at the time. And near the end of the article, just give me a moment, the last thing I saw, which I thought was interesting as well, when Nixon was at Reykjavik for the conference with Pompidou. Of course, they met with Icelandic government officials too. It says here that a gasoline bomb was thrown through a window of the U.S. Cultural Center here tonight. That's May 30th, 1973. It's a gasoline bomb through the Cultural Center window of the U.S., but caused little damage. The attack was apparently in protest to President Nixon attending a conference there. So even back in the early 70s, things were not real smooth all the time between protesters and the politicians. And not going to attempt to say his name, and that is in Icelandic. 1974, he was the king at Norway at the, I think he's, oh gosh, I might get that wrong. Probably was the king of Denmark, my apologies, king of Denmark at the time. And nice stamp along here with it. And shows an image here of the horses. And a few others. 1971. Here is Kirkjufell, so it's in the West Fjords on the peninsula. That's very difficult to say, so not quite into the West Fjords yet. That would be the following day for us. You may recognize that from Game of Thrones. I think it was called Arrow Mountain in the Game of Thrones series. So cool stuff, and a few other random first day covers here too. This cover, 1986, shows the town of Stikkisholmer and then the town of Sedisfjordur, which I don't remember visiting, but Stikkisholmer, we stayed there the first night out of Reykjavik. The next day we took a ferry across the bay and began our West Fjords trip from there. Beautiful little town. This is one of the stamps sheets I picked up at a post office in Islfjordur up in the north. Quite sure that's where I got that. I love the look of the flags. And then a few postcards. I also picked these up at the flea market. Actually, this used postcard here I purchased online from Vance Auctions at online auction on the back. But the others I picked up from a lady, same place I got the first day covers with the Nixon and Pompidou covers on them. And this is showing the area, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site now, the Thingvi. So where the settlers and chiefs of the different regions in Iceland at the time would have met and to set up their democratic system. And this was a really cool place. Asbury, and this is a massive canyon wall of columnar basalt all the way around here, and then there's a singular massive block out on its own. I think this was Islfjordur in the north. Don't quote me on that one. And just the last piece here I'll show you. It doesn't look very exciting or interesting, but what I really like about this, and this is one of my favorite pickups because it was given to me after I chatted with that lady that I bought those covers from, and then continued on in the flea market. She tracked me down actually in the flea market. She found me in another booth, and she said, I'd like you to have this. I said, oh, well, thank you very much. And on the back, it's sent from the United States, sent from Northern Virginia in 1979, but it was sent to her father. I think she said it was from her sister or her father's sister. I can't remember the story now. To him in Reykjavik in 1979, and airmail. You see there's the airmail stamp. I was just very touched because she knew that I had an interest in philately and postal history, and she could have kept that because really that's a bit of piece of family history. But she said, I want you to have this. I said, wow, very kind of you. And I got a picture of her holding that as well. And these are some of the covers I picked up from her, which were kind of random, not Iceland covers, but I thought it was kind of cool just to have the little bit of political history there too. So just a quick tour through some of the covers that I had found and what I've learned about some of the history, political history of the early 70s in Iceland, and why the heck there's first day cover of Nixon and Pompidou on Icelandic covered with stamps. Always something to learn, isn't there, with stamps and postal history. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll continue on perhaps with Iceland or with another country in our next episode. Thanks very much, folks. Have a great day and happy stamping.